So we're okay now. And so when Cindy said to me, if we're going to have a panel on community leadership, who should lead that panel of your statewide partners? And I immediately said, well, Alvaro Sanchez. And the reason I say that is that, when I think of leadership, I think of Alvaro and the Greenlining Institute and what they've done in terms of really moving the dialogue on environmental justice at the state level in California. So when I refer to Alvaro and Greenlining Institute and I think of leadership, I'm talking about leadership in terms of Alvaro represents 25% of a coalition of 4 statewide nonprofits that have really engaged vigorously over the last several years to bring that environmental justice dialogue to a significant forefront at the state capitol after years of it being definitely a back burner issue. And when I talk about success and leadership, that I'm talking about them sponsoring and driving SB 535, all 4 iterations of it until they finally succeeded and got Governor Brown's signature. When I'm talking about leadership, I'm talking about their success in making sure that the funding guidelines that the Air Resources Board has developed for the expenditure of cap and trade revenues over the next several years had an opportunity for public comment in Southern California where there was one that previously didn't exist, and those funding guideline written comments were moved as well so that everyone could participate. And finally, when I'm talking about leadership, I'm talking about their engagement in the cap and trade and the greenhouse gas reduction fund debate, where this coalition identified 5 priorities out of dozens that they could pick from to say, these are where we think we're going to get the most benefit for disadvantaged communities as we move forward. And urban forestry was one of them. And I don't think it's any coincidence that of the multiple coalitions that organized around cap and trade funding, the only multidisciplinary coalition that got 100% of what they wanted was the 535 coalition last year. A tremendous feat. After funding was appropriated, they decided that they were going to build subcommittees within this coalition to handle the various issues that they advocated for: affordable housing, transit, urban forestry. And much to my delight, Alvaro was the chosen one to lead the urban forestry committee. He's done a great job on that. We've worked together for about a year now. He's a great partner in this effort. There's going to be a meeting next week, a conference call. I believe it's on the 26th. Really encourage everyone to participate. They're very valuable. They really talk about what direction we need to be going next in this conversation about urban forestry, disadvantaged communities, greenhouse gas reductions. We're thrilled to have him here. He's going to introduce his own panel, which he picked for this presentation, and I just want to welcome Alvaro Sanchez.
Thanks, Chuck. That was really nice. I'm going to take that recording and then play it for other folks. Hi, everyone. Good morning. How's everyone doing? Everybody good with their coffee now? I know I needed it in the morning. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Chuck and California Relief, for the invitation to come and share a few thoughts with you around the work that we do, around our approach to trees and community leadership, and really to our vision for using the tools that the state of California is leading with, greenhouse gas reduction funding, charging polluters for the emissions that they pollute, and using that funding in a way that advances our fight against climate change, but really brings about equity to the communities that have been facing these impacts of climate change first and worst. Those are communities that you all are familiar with and that you all know, and communities that we deeply care about at the Greenlining Institute. So sorry. One second. There we go. So, as I said, my name is Alvaro Sanchez. I'm the Environmental Equity Director at the Greenlining Institute. And what I'm here to talk to you about today are going to be about urban forestry being used as a gateway to broader conversations about climate change in disadvantaged communities. We also are going to highlight best practices for engaging communities using urban forestry projects. And we want to talk about some of the opportunities that the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund provide in the work that you do, and as a way to bring non-traditional partners to this type of work. But before I move forward, how many of you have heard of Cap and Trade, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, or SB 535 by show of hands? Great, a great number of you. So I don't have to go into all those details, which is really fantastic. So a little bit about greenlining. Greenlining is the response to redlining. We are a nonprofit that was established in 1993, where we built a coalition of ethnic business chambers, ethnic media, and other social organizations that deeply cared about providing economic opportunity for communities that had been redlined out of being able to have a prosperous life in the nation. So we have a number of subject areas that we work on, including economic equity, health, voting, telecom, energy, and environmental equity, which is a program that I manage. We are also providing leaders out. We have a leadership academy in which we train young new leaders to take positions in government, in the private sector, and nonprofit sector. And just last week, we graduated our newest class, and we have about 1,000 alumnus of our academy that are now out doing great things in the world and advancing the work that we care about at the Greenlining Institute. So a little bit about me. I consider myself a non-traditional environmentalist. I was born in Mexico City. I love cities, partly because I was born in a super awesome one. And I really didn't have that big relationship with the outdoors, but I'm really borrowing a lot of the previous presentation in that I think my relationship to the outdoors came through my parents. My dad is from a state called Tlaxcala, and the place in Tlaxcala that he loved the most is the mountain that you see on the screen. He called it La Malinche. And there's many words for that mountain, but that's the one that stuck in my brain, and that's like La Malinche. And we used to go there a lot, and we used to camp, and I kind of hated it, to tell you the truth, because I wanted to be in the comfort of my home. But that stuck with me. No matter where I'm at, I'm always thinking about that. I always think about those times that we spent in the outdoors, and as much as I hated it, I love that story. I love the fact that we did that, and that my dad put me in a position that I was somewhat uncomfortable with, and I learned a lot from those experiences. But I say this to say that my experience with the environment actually is a little bit more negative, which is the experience that a lot of people of color, low-income communities experience with the environment in the United States, which means that communities of color often are the first and the worst hit by climate change and pollution. So I mentioned this to Chuck when we were talking about this presentation, that I remember growing up in East LA and playing basketball on the hardtop during the summer, and I remember my feet being burned at the end of my 2-hour session of basketball. And that was because the asphalt was so hot during the summer that it just really burned my feet, and I didn't understand why that was. But now I think about it, and it's like, well, there were no trees where I played basketball. It was just concrete and asphalt. That's all I had. So, whether it's asthma rates that are high in low-income communities, whether it's flooding that happens in low-income communities, whether it's refinery explosions like the one we saw in Richmond, the communities that live around that's their relationship with the environment, which is sometimes, obviously, is not the best. But we can't forget that we also have really deep relationships with the environment and with nature that are really good. And going back to the previous presentation, I think it's about making that connection and filling that gap, where urban forestry projects, I think, have a real tangible way of achieving that. And that's what we're here to talk about for sure. But don't want to forget that, again, the relationship and the paradigm that we have when we relate to environmental conversations often start here. And that's really important. So when we started doing the work on SB 535, it was really to identify ways that we can bring in the good, right? So we're dealing with the bad in our communities. We're dealing with high rates of pollution. We're dealing with a lot of trucks going through our neighborhoods, with refineries happening in our backyard. We're dealing with a lot. So what do we do to be able to bring in some of the good? Environmental justice really does a really great work on addressing the bad, right? Fighting against Chevron, fighting against high polluting, toxic industrial players in our communities. Environmental equity, which is the program that we have at Greenlining, we're really thinking about bringing in the good. How do we bring investment into these communities? How do we bring ways to mitigate against some of the negative consequences of industry and pollution? So SB 535, as you all know, directs a minimum of 25% of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund for benefits that for projects that benefit the community, and 10% of that is for projects within the community. And what SB 535 really does, and the opportunity that we have to leverage here, is that it provides a way for us to deliver triple bottom line outcomes in communities that are hit the worst. And in addition to that, SB 535 has created a vehicle for us to really invest in community engagement and partnership, because as the tenet of that policy is for those projects that are being funded to address immediate needs that those communities have. So many times, for us to understand what those needs are, is we need to actually speak to those communities and figure out exactly what it is that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and how we can tailor our projects in a way that addresses those needs. And I think the case studies that I'm gonna share with you in a second are really great examples of how their projects are, shifting the way that they're thinking about doing their work in a way that addresses the most pressing needs the communities are facing on a day-to-day basis. So in terms of community engagement through trees, the reason why I'm so excited about this topic, and the reason why I have, it's such a valuable piece of what the SB 535 Coalition carries, is because it's incredibly tangible. When I talk to communities in Oakland that experience a tree planting operation, everybody comes out. Everyone wants to see what's happening on my street. Why are so many people just showing up and planting trees? And the best thing about it is that many times that's not the first time they've heard about it, because folks like Urban Relief in Oakland have done an amazing job of getting folks to understand the value of trees, to know why they're coming in, and to really embrace these tree planting operations as a way to mitigate some of the concerns that they have as a community. So how visible they are and how tangible those projects are is actually one of the best reasons why we promote urban forestry as a really good piece of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund that should continue to get funded. I talked about addressing immediate needs. Trees provide good quality food, as you're here from the incredible edible garden folks. It improves quality of life. It provides green space. It provides safety. And in some unique ways, it might actually provide infrastructure improvements that would otherwise not be happening. Stormwater management. In my previous role at Green for All, I used to work on green infrastructure as a way to mitigate against stormwater, to manage stormwater. And it was amazing how many cities were embracing green infrastructure as a way to combat and to address some of their stormwater needs and improve their water quality. So I think we have a really great opportunity to use urban forestry as a way to improve the conditions of the folks that live in these communities. We talked a lot of, the previous presentation really focused on meeting folks where they're at, right? Listening to them, asking questions, relating to their culture and to their personal stories. And this is something that I emphasize a lot, not just with this program, but with all the others. Before we go and say, hey, this community needs trees, let's dig a little bit more. And let's find out if folks need jobs, if folks need their sidewalks repair, if folks need healthier food options. Let's really try to address what are some of the pressing community needs that folks have, and then think about how do we develop a project to address those needs, because that's really going to be the way for us to bridge that gap and to make our projects even more, have the community embrace them at a higher level. So meeting folks where they're at is really important. And once you meet their immediate needs, you can have conversations about other stuff, such as climate change, such as wonky policy like AB 32 or SB 535. You're going to have an actual way to share a dialogue and a vocabulary about why all of this is important, and all of this relates to each other. And for urban forestry, the fact that it's such a participatory experience, actually, I think, feel, which you all know this, and studies show it over and over again, it just means that the communities care more about the projects that are coming in. One of the best projects that I had at Green for All was to go around the country and interview folks who had participated in urban forestry projects and green infrastructure projects in their communities. And it was amazing how it didn't matter if you were in Arizona, or if you were in Cleveland, or if you were in New York or Syracuse, or if you were in San Francisco, everybody said, because I planted that tree or I implanted that rain garden, I care about that rain garden way more. And because I did that, I'm telling everybody around me why that's such an important piece of infrastructure to have in our city. So I think that the participation aspect of these projects is really one of the ways that we can continue to move forward the conversation on climate here in California. So what I want to do is I really want to toss it over to my fellow panelists here to talk about their story, because as much as I know this information, and I learned this information from them and from folks like you that are doing the work on the ground, I myself am not doing the work on the ground. I'm not myself not being challenged with the conversations about culture and about translation and about how to approach a household that maybe has never been talked to about urban forestry. But these folks have. So I want to toss it over to them to have them share their experience, some of their methods, and really to share with us some of their challenges and ways to address those challenges, so that we can all learn and have a good dialogue around how do we build leadership and community engagement through working with urban forestry projects. So the two folks that are here with me are Ryan and Louis. Ryan works at the Koreatown Youth Community Center, and he'll introduce more about his work. But first I'll have Louis come up to share some information about the incredible edible garden and some of the projects that they have here in the Inland Empire. So Louis, do you want to come up?
First, I just want to say it's an absolute pleasure to be here. When I was in high school and I first heard about climate change, I think Al Gore had just released The Inconvenient Truth, and it was the buzz around town. And I remember growing up in Moreno Valley. That was my first home, and then moving up to the mountain in the Lake Arrowhead area. I lived in Crestline, and when I heard about climate change and its effects on the environment, I said, this makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, here I was growing up in a disadvantaged community near Moreno Valley. My sister was suffering from asthma, missing days from school. My friends were too. And then I move up the mountain, and I would go down the hill, and you can just see this gray, cloud, just like an endless cloud of smog over the entire Inland Empire. And I remember being in the bus line and having diesel fumes pushed right into my face and it hurting my lungs, and be like, yeah, this climate change thing makes sense. And so I just want to say, I would have never thought, first understanding the concept of climate change, that I would be in the same room with the exact same people who are fighting to reverse it and make this place a healthier and happier place to live. So I just want to say thank you for having me. A little bit under pressure. This is my first time doing anything like this, but as Billie Jean King said one time, pressure is a privilege. So, so I'm periscoping the panel today as well. So if you're familiar with the app and you want to say hi to everybody who's watching on the internet, it's right over there on the little tripod. So I just want to say hi, Mom. And, and shout out to Lars Angeles if he's watching with United Way, working to address homelessness in Los Angeles. And I'll come back to that as it relates to one of our community projects that the incredible Edible Community Garden has done. So I just want to briefly introduce who I am and what I feel I bring to this conversation. Like I said, I grew up near disadvantaged communities as a kid. I'm a lifelong resident of the Inland Empire, and for the last 3 years, I've been working as a staff person for Supervisor Josie Gonzalez, who represents the 5th District of San Bernardino County, and she has a very close understanding of the areas that she's trying to reach, and so it's my job to also work with those people and understand who they are and how to communicate with them as a communications director for our office. The 5th District, it's made up of Fontana, Rialto, Colton, the vast majority is San Bernardino, which if you've seen the Cal Enviro screen tool, it's very red. A lot of it's red. And Muscoy and Bloomington is also within that district. And in my experience in the office, I can tell you that each community has its own unique qualities. A lot of them have similar characteristics, but the people within them have very unique characteristics that make up their community. For example, Bloomington, it's a community that was once very rural. There's still horses there and chickens. People keep farms, but now they're facing the idea of urban sprawl, and if they want to maintain, the services and the projects that they want to have in a community and live in a healthier environment, they need to now, face the idea of going away from that rural environment. So a snapshot of, the disadvantaged communities in our county or in our district. I mean, over 50% of San Bernardino is on some type of welfare assistance. And when you think about that, it's quite astounding, and that's over 40% in Colton as well. And that number is just as bad in Rialto and Fontana as well. In regards to healthy foods, it's a food desert. We have the highest ratio of fast food restaurants and convenience stores compared to grocery stores in the entire state. When you're a poor working family working a 12-hour shift from 6 to 6, I mean, are you going to go to the grocery store and walk up and down the aisles to get a bunch of groceries and pay more? Or are you going to pay the $10 for like the bucket of chicken and some biscuits for your kids that are hungry now, or the $5 pizza at Little Caesars, or go through the drive-thru on the way home? So these are the type of challenges that this community faces. I mean, in the poorest areas, Muscoy, which is within the San Bernardino Unified School District, I'm not joking you, 99% of the students enrolled in that school are on reduced lunch. 99%. 93% throughout the entire Unified School District. Throughout the entire school district, 93%. 60% of those students in that Muscoy school are enrolled in ESL classes. 60%. If the kids aren't speaking English, do you think the parents are speaking English as well? Are they able to, communicate and be really, truly engaged with a community that's predominantly English speaking? So I'm going to talk about how IACG addresses that as well. So for the last 3 years, like I said, I've been working with disadvantaged communities, and IACG, the Incredible Edible Community Garden, has been working with them since they were founded in 2009. And I just want to give a little bit of a background about the two co-executive directors, the two leaders that I work with, Mary Pettit and Eleanor Torres. These are two individuals who have worked on behalf of disadvantaged communities and blighted communities for the majority of their professional careers. And one of them has now moved in retirement and redefined what her retirement means to her, and has completely devoted herself to creating healthier communities through urban forestry projects and community gardens, and that's Mary Pettit. And she, from when she was teaching doctoral students all the way to leading a pharmaceutical company onto the New York Stock Exchange, she's been constantly working to create equality. And that goes the same for Eleanor Torres. Whether she was on the NASA team or working for Tree People, she has a focus on bringing equality and fairness to these individual communities. And that's what I love about what we're talking today, because essentially we're trying to eliminate the disparities in health and make it a healthier place for a lot of the residents in the Inland Empire. So let me continue on saying how I first met the Incredible Edible Community Garden. It was a community meeting that they were using to build the Nicholson Park Community Garden and Fruit Tree Park as well. And this is in San Bernardino, on the west side of San Bernardino. Even the freeways alongside this community were built in a way where access was only granted to the east side, and the west side was shut off for a very long time until the actual freeway widened up and we were able to access on the west side. But when I got to this community engagement meeting, and I've been to these meetings before in Bloomington where you have a consultant come out, they're talking about apartment buildings they want to bring, and you still feel that it's not genuine. They're just out there to do the status quo that they have to achieve, which is talk to the community, make sure they know about this. But what was so different about the Incredible Edible Community Garden and their approach was that I can tell this wasn't just like plant it and they will come approach. We're doing something good for this community. They are disadvantaged to an extreme state. If we can just, help them out and tell them this is what they need and we can do this, and they'll come out and support us. It wasn't like that at all. It was much a bottom-up approach. From the very beginning, I could tell the participants the ones in the community were calling the shots. IECG went to the neighborhood association led by Charlie Jacobs, an amazing woman who had actually already been calling for a project like this for almost a decade, I think. And so to be able to connect with the neighborhood association and understand from their perspective what they wanted in their community garden really helped introduce the conversation about, okay, how can we make this a community where you guys want to come, make this a community garden where you guys have a full participatory element in the whole entire process. I mean, they were charged with naming the project. Ideas were taken throughout the entire meeting. Even a high school student for the Montclair Community Garden, this was their first project. She designed the blueprint for the community garden, a high school student, and to have that that complete engaged element of the planning process is very important to having the community take ownership of what we are building. And that's really the important part, I think, that IECG provides, is they let the community take ownership of the project. And they got to plan the grand opening together, and they were deciding on its appearance, the work days, the volunteer days that they were going to come out. And like I said, they really gave them ownership of the project. It wasn't an us and they type of relationship. It was, we're all in this together, and this is the type of thing that we can achieve something great here. So when the nonprofit IECG, they understood, and I say they because I wasn't a part of the nonprofit then, but I am now. They understood that they're guests in these residents' home. They're not coming from an approach of, poor people. We need to have this community garden for you so you can have something, that can, shed a light on this community and maybe possibly make it a better place. It was about, providing something that they wanted. And that's what I thought was so much different than I've experienced with other meetings like this. And the engagement continued throughout the entire build process with the Nicholson Community Garden. The community members were cutting sod, on a weekend in the heat, alongside veterans, alongside other nonprofit agencies, alongside nonprofit leaders, the municipalities. Their leadership came out, and it was a beautiful experience. I mean, they prepped the soil, they planted the fruit trees, and the most important, one of the most unique parts of the project, I felt, was that when everything was done, all the trees were planted, there was a hole dug near one of the trees, and everybody that participated, they brought a buffet for all of us. Everybody brought together an entire potluck, and they said, everybody take a slip of paper and write something on this piece of paper that you feel this tree will represent in the community, or anything that you want to say about this project overall. And so everyone was able to write their little thought on a slip of paper, put it in the jar, and we buried it as a time capsule. So when we come back, 25 years, it's like they had an ownership. They'll remember that moment. The kids that were there, the Girl Scout troop that was there, are going to remember being a part of that community that day, and it's something that's going to carry on for the remainder of that project's life. And even after the prepping and the project was complete, the survey showed, just by the way they were engaging the community so much, that they showed marked increases in the residents' understanding of tree care and how they support healthy communities. And I know that's a big part of what we want to do, want to explain today, is how, not just engaging the community, but helping them understand how is this going to better the environment overall, and not just a place where there's trees. So the successes of these two projects opened the door to a whole nother, opportunity, and many other opportunities. And the key to the entire thing was really partnerships. When I think about what got the community engaged, it was how we approached it, but it was also the amount of partners that we had behind us. The nonprofits that we had to partner with to get that 60% of the population that's on English as a second language. Their parents, they need to have translators there. So we partner with Latino Health Collaborative, Por la Vida, Chaffey Junior College, all to bring translators for those that were Spanish-speaking only. And it's awesome to see those faces light up when everybody's in tune to the same conversation, everybody's on the same page, because we made the extra effort to make sure everybody was involved. The other partners that we had was the city of Montclair to make the space available. We've partnered with the city of Colton before, Ontario Foundation, First Five of San Bernardino provided some funding, former Supervisor Gary Over to the 4th District, the County of San Bernardino. I mean, they have an entire countywide vision that has a portion of their countywide vision dedicated to this type of work. And it's nice to see, one of those nonprofits trying to tell our government to put your money where your mouth is and, understand what we're trying to do here as far as how it ties back into your entire countywide vision. The Board of Supervisors, one thing I did notice was, like, if you just send an invite to each one of these offices, you pick up the phone, you give them a call, hey, did you get the invite? If you invite them, they will come. And that's what happened. That's how I got involved in the entire organization in itself, was we got an invite and somebody was there. So there's your government leadership there at your event just from a simple invite or a phone call. The city of San Bernardino was involved because we got to tap into their Parks and Recreation Commission, and we had the people from the commission involved in the project throughout the entire process. So we had all these different local leaders that were really champions of this project and telling their friends and being able to solicit the publicity that we felt this garden, deserved. We had one of the biggest partnerships we had, which turned into a whole other nonprofit in itself, was the San Bernardino County Department of Veterans Affairs. IECG came up with the idea of using veterans to, build their community gardens, train them, and use them as a tool to, as a great partnership, because now we have the support from the Department of Veterans Affairs at the county. They have other veterans that they can talk to about what they're doing at this community garden, because when you think about what a veteran goes through coming back from deployment, they have to be, they had their troop. They were in that normal, and what they had to reconfigure their minds to think as a normal environment within a troop for so long. And when they come back, they sort of feel disenfranchised from the rest of the community. And so to be able to bring them all together to, turn those skills that they learned as part of a military troop to now transfer it over to community building is something that's really magical, because it's therapeutic almost. I mean, to be part of a group doing something once again is something that they really, really treasure. And like I said, the neighborhood associations, that was I forget what the name was, but like I said, Charlie Jacobs, she had been asking for this for so long, and here was somebody that we can actually turn to sort of lead the conversation in her own community. I don't know where I'm at on time, but okay. So the best practices as far as community engagement, like Alvaro said, coming to them, local, familiar meeting place. We came to a community center that was in the middle of the neighborhood, and everybody was able to access it fairly quickly. And we provided translation services so everyone could participate. And we were partnering with the community organizations and agencies that were already familiar with the neighborhood, like I said, the Latino Health Collaborative. They had already been working within the neighborhood for quite a while, and so it was really helpful to have them on board. And one thing I'll say was they had free produce for the attendees, like just something as simple as that. I think one free bag of grapefruits was the thing that got me into this mess to begin with. I think that was the selling point for me. But like I said, investing in the community leadership, we did that through, contacting the local governments and working through the commissions. And those are the bigger, the 3 C's, I would say. My boss always says the 3 C's: communication, collaboration, and cooperation. That's what IECG achieved in their projects. And they went out there and they did it. And they made sure the community was completely engaged throughout the entire process. Those stakeholders, they really wanted to get to them. And they did. So looking forward to your questions later. I'll step down now so you guys can talk. Sorry if I went too long. Thank you.
I apologize for being underdressed. I didn't realize we were doing the suit and tie thing up here today. All right, there we go. Well, good morning. My name is Ryan Allen. I'm the Environmental Services Manager with the Koreatown Youth and Community Center. And I'm assuming a lot of you are really unfamiliar with KYCC, so I'll just give you a brief overview. We are a multi-service provider that's been working in Koreatown and the surrounding communities for 40 years now. We started off as a drop-in center for Korean American youth, and as the community grew and changed and the needs grew and changed, we changed with that. So you can see some of our programs that we offer behind you. Up in the upper corner there is our free tax assistance program called VITA. We did over 8,000 tax returns for low-income families, which helped bring literally millions of dollars back to them on their tax returns. We have our a lot of youth program. You can see our mentor program and tutoring that we do with after-school kids. Below that, it's our children's center. In the other corner, we have affordable housing that we do, and then in the center, you see one of my favorite events that we do is a holiday carnival, where last year we had over 2,500 youth and families from our local community come out and enjoy a free day, lots of fun games, and all the kids get a free toy from Santa Claus, which got to be me this year. There's a lot of skinny Santa Claus comments. And I get to run our environmental services. So we've been one of the tree planting partners with the city of Los Angeles since they began the Trees for a Green LA program back in the late 90s. We're one of the first tree planting partners when Million Trees LA was started, which is now City Plants with the new mayor in Los Angeles. So since that program was started, we've planted over 10,000 trees in the residential neighborhoods of Los Angeles. And so it's been a great pleasure doing that. If you're unfamiliar with Koreatown and where it is, we're just a couple miles west of downtown Los Angeles. It's only 2.7 square miles, so it's a really small area in the city, but it has 124,000 residents. So that's 42,000 people per square mile. So we're one of the most densely populated neighborhoods of Los Angeles. And as you can see, it's kind of a gray neighborhood on the map. I always like to refer to this, the neighborhood adjacent to it, that nice green spot is Hancock Park, which is a really nice, wealthy neighborhood in Los Angeles. It's always a fun comparison for me. Our community is, we're made up 54% Latino, and it's about 32% Asian, and then just lower breakdowns from there. So just my brief 3 points about engagement. Engagement is listening. It works with local partners, and follow through as you as an organization is very, very important. So when I first started at KYCC 2.5 years ago, the main mode that we used to get trees planted was through canvassing and door knocking. It's effective to a point, but it's extremely inefficient. So we did a little study to see how this was actually working. So over 15 days of sending out 2 to 3 staff for about 4 to 6 hours, we were able to knock on 938 doors. In that time, we were only 30% of the time we were actually able to speak to somebody. So 70% of the time the doors closed and you had to move on to the next place. Not a lot of people were home, but when we did get to talk to somebody, 63% of the time they did want a tree. So while it was very inefficient in the amount of time we'd have to spend knocking on doors and walking around, when you did actually get face-to-face with somebody, they were open to the idea of getting a tree, and were for that. So it's a real predictable action for us. I know if I send out X amount of staff for X amount of time, X amount of trees will be able to get planted through that. But like I said, it's extremely not efficient, but also some really good things came out of those face-to-face interactions with all those residents. Every time we got to know, we got to ask, why do you not want a tree? What's the cause for this? And not surprisingly, the cost of a tree, maintenance were the major reasons. People don't want to pay for the watering, and they don't want to pay for the pruning of it. In Los Angeles, our Urban Forest Division's been cut back drastically since 2008, and the city's maintenance pruning cycle is years and years and years. So residents know if the pruning is going to happen, it's going to be on them. On top of that, we have our buckled sidewalks are very infamous, and a lot of the residents were concerned that their sidewalks were going to get buckled too, even though we explained to them we're going to plant the right tree in the right place. It won't happen here. When they look down the street and they see trees buckling sidewalks, it's really hard for them to disconnect from that. So what happened with this is we did get a lot of trees planted, but because it was so sporadic, it was spread out, and weren't able to really create a lot of really densely packed canopied streets, which is what we really want. And on top of that, because it was free and something that the residents were just saying yeah, and we would go plant the tree for them, they didn't have the buy-in, and they weren't invested in doing the ongoing maintenance and care like they said they would. So we decided, all right, we got to do something a little bit different here. It kind of works, but it's not the best way we know that this could happen. So we said, all right, let's start working with some more local partners. And we partnered up with this group called Axion in Westlake. We're able to get a small cow relief grant to help us do the education materials and things like that. So what we did is this community group already had somewhat of a relationship with us, and through some other programming that they do, but they wanted to plant trees. So we met with them, explained how it all works, and they said, this is great, let's do it. So we held 2 separate training days where we had about 30 of their volunteers and local residents come out, and for about 45 minutes or an hour, we talked to them about trees, why trees are good, the benefits, and explained to them how they can go out in a neighborhood and talk to their other residents about the trees. So we did those 2 days, and then after that, we went out into the community, and the residents, along with our staff, went out and talked to neighbors, talked to the property owners, and said, hey, we got this great free tree program. We would like to plant a tree. Would you like to do it? So through that, we were able to get 30 trees planted in that neighborhood, and we were able to plant those trees over 2 separate community events, and able to do some follow-up maintenance with the community after that. So what we learned from this is that a couple interesting things happened. One, when residents were talking to each other, there was somewhat a little bit more trust with a KYCC staff person as seemingly like we're somewhat of an official city person, as opposed to a resident just talking with the resident, where they didn't necessarily feel comfortable that they were going to follow through all the way with what they were saying they were going to do. It's more time consuming. We have the events, we have the trainings, but before that you have the emails, the phone calls, you have the other meetings. So it takes time and it takes investment, but when you get done with that, you get a better result. These trees are cared for, they're looked after. Whenever a stake goes crooked or a tree looks a little dry, needs some extra water, they give us a call, we can go out, we help them, we bring the stake pounder and fix it with them, and the trees, they get maintained. And finally, the last thing there says we can't have nice things. This has been one of the surprising and really sad attitudes that I've come across with a lot of residents working in our local neighborhoods, is that for so many years of them living there, they've been used to streets without trees on it, graffiti, illegal dumping, just things not being clean and safe, that they've almost come to accept that is what they deserve and that is what their community gets. Beverly Hills, they get to have the nice, clean, beautiful tree-lined streets, but this is what we get over here. So that's been kind of my goal and struggle, is to help residents see that, this is possible. Everyone in LA can have the same beautiful tree-lined streets, and everyone deserves it. Which brings us to our newest iteration of our community engagement. So we did the door knocking, we got some good results as far as getting a lot of trees planted, but maybe not the maintenance and the actual buy-in from the community. We learned a lot from working with the local partners, that's the best way to do that. So we've kind of combined that into our new program that we're going to be starting. Fortunately, we were able to access some of those SB 535 funds from CAL FIRE, and so this year we're going to start our new engagement process where we're going to work with local community groups, the local churches, the local leaders in the neighborhood who have streets that they've identified as the places that they want to green and beautify. And we've learned from our previous canvassing and door knocking work that there's those issues of the cost of the maintenance, the pruning, the broken sidewalks, not wanting to pay for the irrigation on a landscape. Those things are things that hold people back from getting trees planted. So what we're going to do is work with those local groups, teach them about the benefit of trees, and then go out into the community and work with those residents. And when they identify what those barriers are in the neighborhood, we're going to work with them to help overcome them. So if a resident of a neighborhood, a street is saying, we love trees, but we got all these broken sidewalks to begin with, we're going to say, okay, great. We're going to help work with you. We're going to get some resources brought in from the city. We have some resources as well that we can provide. We'll get your sidewalks fixed so we can overcome that barrier first. And then we're going to come in and we'll plant trees, and we're going to be able to help maintain those trees for the next 3 years afterwards. Because our goal is that you can see this lovely Catalpa standing on its own over here. And this is a pretty typical view of a lot of streets in South Los Angeles. But surprisingly, the other two streets are less than a half a mile away from that tree. It is possible in these disadvantaged communities, it is possible in South LA to have these beautiful tree-lined streets, but there's not enough examples and there's not enough places that residents can look to and say that this is possible in my community. So we want to spend that extra time and investment to engage with the community, make sure they understand the resources that we can provide with them, and then get densely canopied planted streets. So when we're done and after the maintenance is done over 3 years, the residents on that street will have a beautiful tree-lined street, but then the next block over, they can look at it and go, wow, that street looks great. We can have that over here too, and start to create some momentum within these neighborhoods. So like I said, finally, my 3 points: engagement is listening. Whenever we were working with the local partners, whenever we were working with canvassing, it's not about what I think is good or what I think would help benefit the neighbors and the residents. It's about having them let you know what it is that you can help them with, and then being able to access the resources to do that. There's some things I can't do, but you know what? Maybe there's somebody else I know that does it really well, and we can bring them in to help out with that project. Local partnerships. We're a local community-based organization. We work in Koreatown, Pico, Union, Westlake. We have a lot of really tight partnerships there, but even within that, there's other organizations that are even more localized within a smaller neighborhood that are even more connected to those residents. And those are really the groups that are your champions in starting these projects. They know all the moms that are the ones that are going to get the kids and their husbands out on the Saturday morning to plant the trees. They know the local politics. They know how to navigate getting the trees planted and getting people to be invested in your projects. You might be that local group, and that's awesome. And you're the ones that really sustain those projects after they've happened. And follow through. As a nonprofit, as somebody that's going into the community and making promises to people that we can do something together, my word and following through on that is the only thing that helps keep us going in the neighborhood. If we didn't do what we said we were going to do, people wouldn't want to work with us, and it would become evident real quick that we didn't have a good enough reputation within our communities that we're working in to make things happen. So for me, that's meant don't bite off more than I can handle. Say no when I need to, but when I do say yes, make sure that I follow through and that the projects happen. And I think that's it for me, so thank you.
We don't have a ton of time for questions, but if there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer any. Do we need a mic, or are we okay? Oh, I think there's a question up.
I have two questions. Where do you get the funding for greenlining, and where do you get the money for the water for the gardens?
I can answer the greenlining question, and I'll let my colleagues answer the water question. Greenlining is funded by various foundations and other sponsorships. So we're just like a traditional nonprofit. We don't get any like actual government funding. Yeah. And the water question?
I believe, and I can follow up with you after this to confirm, I can give you my email, but I believe it was the city of San Bernardino through the Nicholson Community Garden. They had the community park there already set up with the water lines and everything, and it was, I guess it was complimentary.
I'm from the city of Richmond, and we're just starting on our climate action plan, and they had the first meeting that we had with the partnerships and shareholders, they had trees and urban forestry very well. It wasn't in the first group of listing, and so we've been pushing and pushing and pushing. We've had our first community meeting. We'll have another one in September. Is there any way, the city knows, but just trying to way to keep making the people understand about it. Is there any way to get that information across more?
The benefits of trees information?
Not so much that as that what trees do for climate change. That's the bigger thing. People sometimes don't understand, trees are pretty, trees make it cooler, but what do they do to change the sequestering and all the different things that are incurred? And to make it not so scientific for everyone, because that's the harder part.
I think the important thing is maybe not to focus on the global impact of climate change, because frankly people don't really care about that when they have their local issues. So I think the important thing to focus on is, your city is going to get hotter, and trees are going to make your community adaptable to the future. You're going to, we're already in this drought, right? So trees are going to help keep our water in the ground for the future. So I think trying to focus as much as possible on how things will have changed, but how locally that tree is going to benefit the community is the best way to do that.
And I would just say, to echo that statement, it's think about the immediate impacts that they face every day, and it's the heating effect. In San Bernardino, triple-digit temperatures throughout the entire summer. That's something that you could really communicate that trees can really affect, and the drought as well. So, and we've thrown around the idea, maybe recruiting some different kind of thought leaders in this, as far as connecting with the students. An idea that's been thrown around with IACG is maybe creating some student advisory councils in universities and high schools, where they can then, I feel like as a student, or as a former student, they kind of magnetize these kind of big, make the world a better place type of issues. And for them to educate the children first is a really big step, I think. So.
I think one of the things that we talk about in Greenlining a lot is that all of these are part of a holistic approach to community development. So it's not just the weatherization working in silo from the solar panels and silo from clean transportation. Is that everything combined is really an approach to improving our communities, and that trees play a really big important role in that.
Your points are very well taken, and as we get into working with disadvantaged communities in through the cap and trade money, the communities as defined are census tracts, and they are not necessarily communities. They're just pieces of land. And at least our initial sense of one of the areas that we're trying to connect with is there is no community. And I mean, and we're just getting started, so we're not giving up, but as you try to connect with partners in the community, there's no there there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just blocks of, and there was, for example, apparently a community association several years ago that failed. And depending upon further investigation, if that turns out to be the case, you know, I'm trying to consider alternative models of maybe those neighborhoods, we give them an association, tree stewards of some sort or something. We create, you know, something because we need them for all the reasons we all understand to help protect and maintain the trees. But, you know, it's just, we've been going down the path you've been describing, and it's, you know, there's nobody at the other end of the phone yet. So I'm curious as to, I imagine you've confronted this sort of thing, so I'm curious as to what, you know, brilliant ideas you can give us.
Well, there's a really big challenge there in terms of is there community capacity to do some of this work? You know, I would say that if it's a place where people live, there has to be some type of community. It's just about you know, identifying the different types. So, for example, I think that with the encyclical and with the Pope taking a really great leadership role in terms of our fight against climate change, that signals to us that maybe we can partner with faith-based organizations and think about extending beyond the traditional community groups that we identify and start thinking about some of these other non-traditional groups, which is the one that I classified myself under as a way to you know, start having conversations about how to, you know, use their infrastructure and identify if there are ways that we can gap their mission with the work that we're trying to do. So, you know, I think that I've been really excited by the direction that a lot of faith-based organizations have been taking as it relates to this issue, because they see that you know, the members of their congregations are impacted by climate change as well, and that they actually want to do something about it, and that they have really strong infrastructures to be able to do it. So I would say we need to dig a little bit deeper and start kind of broadening our horizons about who are these community groups and how can we better engage with them. You know, I don't think there's one particular method, but just being open to alternative partnerships that may not have been explored already, but that's a key issue. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but myself and my colleagues here are going to be here for the rest of the day. So catch up with us and ask us questions, and we'd love to continue to talk to you. So thank you for giving us our time.